Welcome to Ethan's Revenge.
I watched as my boss, Tom Harris, leaned back in his oversized leather chair, fingers steepled together like he was about to deliver some life-changing wisdom. "This shows you're not committed to our team, Alex," he said, his tone dripping with false concern. He adjusted the cuffs of his custom suit, the kind of sharp tailoring that only came from a personal stylist. "We need people who believe in our mission, not someone with one foot out the door. My name is Alex Porter, 31 years old, and until that Thursday morning, a senior sales manager at Stratos Analytics. I'd spent the last 6 years building client relationships, closing deals, and pulling in millions for the company while my own paycheck barely kept up with rent hikes. Just last quarter, I brought in over $1.8 million in new business, the biggest single account Stratos had landed all year. But Tom didn't care about that. He never had. He cared about loyalty, or at least the illusion of it. And I'd broken that illusion the moment I took a single day off for a job interview. "You're terminated effective immediately," Tom said, folding his hands like a judge delivering a sentence. "I need you to clear out your desk. Security will escort you out." I took a deep breath, letting his words hang in the air for a moment. He was expecting a reaction, anger, maybe even a desperate plea to reconsider. But I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction. I stood, straightened my tie, and reached across his massive desk to shake his hand. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said calmly, locking eyes with him. His expression faltered for a split second, like he'd just missed a step going down a dark staircase. The walk back to my desk felt surreal. I passed rows of polished glass offices and workstations, the whispers already spreading like wildfire. People who had once leaned on me for advice suddenly found their monitors fascinating, fingers tapping keyboards just a little too quickly. I reached my desk and grabbed a cardboard box from the supply closet. I didn't have much to pack. A couple of framed photos, a coffee mug my sister bought me when I first landed the job, and the small cactus I'd somehow kept alive under the harsh fluorescent lights. As I dropped my work laptop into the box, I noticed my direct supervisor, Jeff, peeking out from his office. He quickly ducked back, pretending to be on a call. The same guy who had taken credit for half my deals and assured me 3 times that my promotion was just waiting on Tom's approval. I placed my badge on the corner of my now empty desk, lifted the box, and made my way to the elevators. As the doors slid closed, I caught a reflection of myself in the polished metal. I didn't look angry. I didn't look defeated. If anything, I felt lighter. Tom thought he'd put me in my place. He had no idea what I had prepared for him. I sat in my car in the Stratos Analytics parking garage, the engine idling, cold air from the vents whispering over my face. The box of my belongings sat on the passenger seat, a sad inventory of 6 years of loyalty reduced to a few photos, a coffee mug, and a cactus. I let out a slow breath, watching a group of my former colleagues huddle together near the building entrance, stealing nervous glances in my direction. They were already spreading the news. Tom had made sure of that. I reached for my phone and pulled up my LinkedIn app. My profile still read Senior Sales Manager at Stratos Analytics, a title that had once felt like a badge of honor, now just an echo of a chapter one couldn't wait to close. "Time for an update," I muttered, tapping the edit button. I changed my status to Exploring New Opportunities and updated my headline to Business Development and Client Growth Specialist, a quiet signal to the hundreds of contacts I'd built over the years. As I hit save, my phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa Brooks, a former client who had recently taken a VP role at Nexus Technologies. "Heard what happened. Let's catch up. I might have something for you." I leaned back, a small smile creeping onto my face. Vanessa had always been sharp, the kind of executive who appreciated a good closer. I brought her company on as a client 2 years ago, landing one of Stratos' biggest contracts. Tom had taken the credit, of course, but Vanessa knew exactly who had done the real work. I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat and put the car in gear, pulling out of the garage without a backward glance. Back at my apartment, I dropped the box on the kitchen counter and opened a beer. The place felt different, emptier, even though nothing had changed. I wandered into the living room, staring out the window at the busy Chicago streets below. 6 years. 6 years of grinding out deals, skipping family gatherings, canceling vacations, and staying late to hit quarterly targets. 6 years of listening to Tom preach about loyalty while he pocketed bonuses from my work. I took a long pull from my beer, feeling a slow burn settle in my chest. I'd built my entire career on relationships, trust, and delivering results. Tom thought he could erase all that with a single meeting and a cardboard box. He had no idea what I was capable of. I pulled my laptop from my bag, powered it up, and connected to the secure personal server I'd set up years ago. A digital insurance policy, just in case my loyalty was ever rewarded with a knife in the back. I typed in my password, fingers moving faster as the anger started to sharpen my focus. I pulled up the client database I'd quietly backed up 6 months ago, the one Tom didn't know existed. Names, contracts, billing cycles, pain points, the kind of data that could destroy Stratos' biggest accounts if it fell into the right hands. I stared at the screen for a long moment, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat, before opening a new folder and naming it Phoenix, a fitting title for what I was about to build from the ashes of my career. I sat at my kitchen counter, the soft hum of my refrigerator the only sound in my empty apartment. My laptop screen cast a cold, bluish glow across the marble countertop as I scrolled through the client data I'd quietly backed up over the past year. It wasn't just a contact list. It was a playbook, notes on each client's business struggles, their budget constraints, the little details that made them renew contracts year after year. The kind of insights you only get by building real relationships, not just closing deals. I opened the folder labeled Phoenix and started organizing the files. I built my career on understanding people, finding the cracks in their problems and offering the perfect fit. I was about to do the same thing, just on a larger scale. I took a long sip of my beer, feeling the tightness in my chest start to unwind. I'd been playing by Stratos' rules for too long, waiting for a promotion that would never come. Tom thought he'd taught me a lesson today, but he'd only sharpened my focus. My phone buzzed. Another message, this time from Tyler Chin, one of my old contacts at Ryland Dynamics. Hey, Alex. Heard you're back on the market. Let's grab coffee. I have an idea. I smiled, adding his name to the growing list of potential allies. I hadn't even announced my next move, and the network I'd spent years building was already reaching out. I set my beer down and leaned back, fingers hovering over the keyboard as I typed out a simple message. Absolutely. Let's meet tomorrow. 10 a.m. I hit send, then pulled up my financial spreadsheets. I'd been saving aggressively for years, funneling bonuses and commission checks into a series of low-risk investments. I wasn't rich, but I had enough to cover a few months of living expenses while I put my plan into motion. I leaned forward, my fingers tapping out a quick email to Vanessa at Nexus Technologies. Hey, Vanessa. Just wanted to say thanks for reaching out earlier. I'd love to catch up and hear more about what you're building at Nexus. I have a few ideas I think you'll like. I hit send, then closed my laptop. I stood, stretching my arms over my head, feeling the quiet, focused energy that always hit me when I started piecing together a new strategy. Tom had given me a push, but I was the one who would decide how it landed. I picked up my phone, pulled up my contact list, and started scrolling. I had dozens of former clients, industry contacts, and old colleagues who owed me favors. People who trusted me, respected me. I poured myself another beer, raised the glass to my laptop, and whispered to the empty room. Monday is going to be interesting. I woke up the next morning feeling clearer than I had in months. Maybe years. The kind of clarity that only comes after you've burned a bridge and realized the view on the other side is better. I showered, dressed in a clean button-down and my best blazer, and grabbed my laptop before heading out the door. I had 2 meetings today, one with Tyler Chin at Ryland Dynamics and another with Vanessa Brooks at Nexus Technologies. As I pulled out of my apartment complex, my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. My profile update from the night before had already sparked interest, a half-dozen messages from recruiters, old clients, and a few colleagues who'd left Stratos over the years. I scrolled through the names, a slow smile spreading across my face. I'd forgotten how valuable my network really was. I met Tyler at a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and overpriced espresso. He was already seated in a corner booth, his phone face down on the table, a nervous energy radiating off him. Alex, good to see you, he said, standing to shake my hand. He looked leaner than I remembered, the stress of his new role clearly wearing him down. I ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and sat down across from him. Tyler leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I heard about what happened at Stratos. Total BS, man. You deserved better. I just nodded, letting him talk. Listen, he continued, glancing around like someone might be listening. Ryland is expanding aggressively this year. They're opening a new division, and they need someone with your experience to run it. Someone who knows how to build relationships, close deals, manage teams. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting his words sink in. I'd expected him to pitch me a sales role, but this was different. He was talking about building something from the ground up, My kind of project. What's the catch? I asked, meeting his eyes. Tyler smirked, leaning back in his chair. No catch. Just a chance to stick it to Stratos. They've been bleeding clients for months, and their reputation is slipping. We want someone who knows their weaknesses, someone who can hit them where it hurts. I felt a slow, cold satisfaction settle into my bones. This was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been hoping for. All right, I said, setting my coffee down. Let's talk numbers. An hour later, I walked out of the coffee shop with a handshake agreement and a rough outline for a partnership that could turn Stratos' biggest accounts into my biggest clients. I felt lighter, my steps quicker as I crossed the street back to my car. I leaned against the hood for a moment, pulled out my phone, and fired off a quick text to Vanessa. Free to talk today? I have a few ideas I think you'll like. I hit send, slid my phone back into my pocket, and climbed into the driver's seat. It was only Friday, but I could already see Monday shaping up to be one hell of a day. Vanessa responded before I even reached my car. Absolutely. Meet me at my office at 2 p.m. I'll clear my schedule. I smirked, tossing my phone onto the passenger seat. Vanessa had always been sharp, but more importantly, she was ambitious. She wouldn't have reached out unless she had something big in mind. I spent the next few hours at my apartment, refining the pitch I planned to deliver to her. I pulled up the Phoenix folder on my laptop, adding a few final touches to the client profiles I'd organized. If I was going to take on Stratos, I needed a solid foundation. I typed out a list of the top 20 accounts I'd brought into Stratos over the years, the ones I'd nurtured, closed, and expanded while my so-called managers took the credit. I knew these clients inside and out. I understood their pain points, their priorities, their budget cycles. More importantly, I knew exactly where Stratos had failed them. I arrived at Nexus Technologies a few minutes before 2 p.m., adjusting my blazer as I walked into the glass lobby. The place had the polished, cutting-edge feel of a company on the rise, modern art on the walls, clean lines, and the quiet hum of focused work. Vanessa met me in the lobby, her sharp gray suit and confident stride reminding me why I'd always respected her. She led me to a glass-walled conference room, where the Chicago skyline stretched out behind her like a promise of bigger things. Thanks for coming in, Alex, she said, closing the door behind us. I've been looking forward to this. I took a seat, setting my laptop on the table but leaving it closed for now. I wanted to hear her pitch before I laid my cards on the table. I'll get straight to the point, Vanessa said, leaning forward, her eyes sharp. Nexus is expanding aggressively this year. We're launching 2 new product lines and breaking into 3 new markets. But we need someone who understands the kind of clients you've been handling at Stratos, someone who can hit the ground running. I leaned back, folding my hands in my lap. And do you think I'm that guy? She smiled, leaning back as well, clearly enjoying the back and forth. I know you are. I've seen the contracts you brought in. I know how much of Stratos' revenue you're responsible for. I let that hang in the air for a moment, studying her expression. Vanessa wasn't just offering me a job. She was offering me a platform, a chance to rebuild what Stratos had taken from me. What's the catch? I asked, echoing the question I'd asked Tyler earlier that morning. Vanessa's smile widened, her eyes narrowing just a fraction. The catch is, I want results. Fast. If you come on board, I need you to bring over as many of your old clients as possible. Hit Stratos hard. Make them feel it. I felt a slow, cold smile spread across my face. That won't be a problem. We spent the next 45 minutes hashing out the details, compensation, commissions, budgets, support teams. By the time I walked out of Nexus's offices, I had a verbal agreement for a 6-figure base salary, uncapped commissions, and a promise to support my transition with a full marketing team. I hit the street, the cool Chicago wind cutting through my jacket, but I barely felt it. I pulled out my phone, fired off a quick message to Tyler at Ryland. Met with Vanessa. It's a go. Let's sync up Monday. I hit send, took a deep breath, and let the city's noise wash over me. Stratos had kicked me out. They had no idea I was about to come back stronger than ever. I got back to my apartment that evening, adrenaline still buzzing in my veins. I dropped my laptop bag on the kitchen counter and cracked open a cold beer, leaning against the granite as I took a long, satisfying pull. I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling through the growing list of LinkedIn notifications. My status update had already sparked a flurry of messages, former clients, old colleagues, even a few Stratos employees who had clearly heard the news. I smiled, opening the most recent one. It was from Greg Stanton, a VP at Arctech Systems, one of the biggest clients I'd brought to Stratos. Hey Alex, heard you're moving on. Let's catch up. I have some ideas. I hit reply without hesitation. Absolutely, Greg. Let's grab lunch next week. I have a few ideas too. I tossed my phone onto the counter and opened my laptop, pulling up the Phoenix folder. I clicked through the subfolders, each one named for a major client I'd personally closed over the past 6 years. Abbott, Westfield, Dynacore, names that had collectively brought in millions for Stratos. I opened the Arctech folder, scrolling through my notes on their account. I'd landed them 3 years ago, flying out to Seattle twice on my own dime to close the deal when Stratos refused to cover the travel expenses. I scanned through the old emails, remembering the late nights and last-minute proposals that had kept the relationship alive. I knew Greg's pain points, his priorities, the gaps in Stratos' service that had always frustrated him. I leaned back, a slow smile spreading across my face. Greg had been one of my biggest supporters, always pushing for me to take a more senior role. If I could pull him over to Nexus, it would be a major blow to Stratos and a huge win for me. I grabbed my phone again and fired off a text to Vanessa. Just heard from Greg Stanton at Arctech. Could be a big win. I'll keep you posted. I hit send and closed the laptop, leaning back in my chair, the quiet hum of the city outside my window. My phone buzzed a few minutes later. Vanessa. Great to hear. I'll greenlight the budget for a targeted campaign if you can bring him over. Let's hit Stratos where it hurts. I chuckled, taking another pull from my beer. This was shaping up better than I'd expected. I stood, walking over to the window, the cold glass cool against my palm as I looked out over the city. I'd spent years grinding for Stratos, bringing in millions while my own pay barely kept up with inflation. Now, I was on the edge of something bigger, and this time, I'd be the one reaping the rewards. I felt a slow, satisfying tension settle into my bones, the kind that comes when you know you're holding all the cards, and your opponent doesn't even realize the game has changed. I turned, looking at the empty cardboard box still sitting on my kitchen counter, the last remnants of my Stratos career packed away like a bad memory. I smiled, raising my beer to the darkened window. Monday is going to be very interesting. Monday morning came fast. I woke up before my alarm, that familiar edge of adrenaline sharpening my senses. Today wasn't just another day at the office. It was the first step in my plan to dismantle everything Stratos had taken from me. I pulled on my best suit, the one I'd reserved for high-stakes client meetings and investor pitches, and grabbed my laptop. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool weight of the metal in my hand, and stepped out into the crisp Chicago morning. I walked into the Nexus Technologies office at exactly 8:45 a.m., the polished marble floors and glass walls humming with the quiet energy of a company on the rise. Vanessa met me at the entrance, her sharp gray suit and confident stride making her look every bit the executive she was. "Morning, Alex," she said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "Ready to shake things up?" I smiled, matching her intensity. "Absolutely." She led me down a long, sunlit hallway lined with framed awards and industry accolades, finally stopping outside a corner office. "Welcome to your new headquarters," she said, pushing the door open. I stepped inside, my eyes quickly scanning the room. It was a stark contrast to the cramped, windowless cubicle I'd left behind at Stratos. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the Chicago skyline, and the heavy oak desk in the center of the room still had that fresh, polished wood smell. Vanessa leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms with a small, satisfied smile. "We'll get you a full team by the end of the week. Marketing, lead gen, account support. Whatever you need." I turned, meeting her eyes. "And the clients?" She straightened, her smile fading into a serious expression. "Bring them over, and I'll give you the resources to take Stratos' market share." I nodded, feeling a slow, cold satisfaction settle into my chest. This was exactly what I needed. A clean slate, a new platform, and the backing of a company that actually valued results. "All right," I said, setting my laptop on the desk. "Let's get to work." I spent the next few hours setting up my new accounts, importing my client notes, and firing off a series of carefully worded emails to my most loyal contacts. People like Greg Stanton at Arctech, who had always valued my honesty and straightforward approach. By lunchtime, my phone was buzzing with responses, meetings set, coffee date scheduled, even a few tentative "let's talk" messages from clients I hadn't heard from in years. I leaned back in my leather chair, letting the satisfaction of momentum wash over me. Stratos had pushed me out, but they'd also freed me to build something better. My office phone rang, cutting through the quiet hum of my new space. I reached for it, glancing at the caller ID. "Tyler Chin." I smiled, Picking up the receiver. Tyler, good to hear from you. Hey, Alex, he said, his tone more relaxed than I'd expected. I just heard a rumor that Nexus is about to make a big push into Stratos' territory. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? I chuckled, leaning back in my chair. You know me, Tyler. I'm just getting started. The rest of the week passed in a blur of phone calls, meetings, and late nights in my new corner office. I felt alive, like I was finally moving at my own pace instead of struggling to keep up with someone else's idea of success. I spent every morning building my team, hand-picking people I knew could deliver under pressure, former colleagues who had been pushed out of Stratos, a few sharp young analysts I'd mentored over the years, and a couple of marketing wizards who knew how to craft the kind of high-impact campaigns that turned cold leads into loyal clients. By Friday, my office felt less like an empty glass box and more like the command center for a carefully orchestrated takeover. That afternoon, I received a calendar invite from Vanessa. The subject line simply read, Strategy Session, Monday 9 a.m. I accepted, leaning back in my chair as I scrolled through the list of clients I'd lined up for introductory calls next week. Arctech, Dynacore, Westfield, each one a piece of Stratos' carefully constructed empire, now just a few phone calls away from becoming part of mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Greg Stanton at Arctech. Got your message. Let's talk next week. I've been looking for a more responsive partner. I chuckled, adding his name to the whiteboard I'd set up behind my desk, the one I'd started using to map out my strategy for the next quarter. I set my phone down, taking a deep breath as I looked at the growing list of potential clients. I was building something real, something I controlled, and Stratos had no idea it was coming. That evening, as I locked up my office and stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from a name I hadn't seen in years, Tom Harris. Alex, I heard you've landed at Nexus. I'd appreciate a chance to catch up. Let's get coffee next week. My treat. I stared at the message for a long moment, the elevator humming quietly as it descended to the lobby. Coffee? With the same man who had kicked me to the curb without a second thought? The same man who had cut my commissions, taken credit for my deals, and pushed me aside the moment I became a threat? I hit reply and typed 2 words. I'll think about it. I hit send, then slipped my phone back into my pocket as the elevator doors slid open. Game on, Tom. I stepped out into the cool Chicago night, the streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement as I walked toward my car. I felt that same cold, calculating focus settle over me, the kind of clarity that only comes when you've finally decided to stop playing by someone else's rules. I unlocked my car, tossed my bag into the passenger seat, and took one last look at the shimmering lights of the Nexus building behind me. They'd given me a new platform, a fresh start, and a reason to fight. Tom had no idea what he'd unleashed. I spent the weekend refining my strategy, my living room floor covered in whiteboards and spreadsheets. I'd mapped out every major client I planned to target, every pain point I knew Stratos had ignored, every frustration my old contacts had ever vented to me over late-night drinks at industry conferences. I had one goal, to make Stratos bleed. By Monday morning, I was in my office at 7 a.m., suit jacket draped over my chair, sleeves rolled up, coffee steaming on my desk. I fired off a quick email to Vanessa, outlining my plan to hit Stratos' core accounts with targeted proposals designed to exploit their weaknesses. Subject: Strategic Strike Client Acquisition Plan. Message: Vanessa. I've identified our top 20 targets, major accounts Stratos can't afford to lose. I'll have the first wave of proposals ready by the end of the week. Let's discuss over coffee today. Alex. I hit send, then leaned back, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a plan coming together. At 9 a.m., Vanessa walked into my office, a fresh espresso in one hand and a stack of folders in the other. She dropped them on my desk, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. Morning, Alex. I reviewed your plan. I like where your head's at. I smiled, leaning forward. Good. Because I'm just getting started. She took a seat across from me, crossing her legs as she flipped open the top folder. I've pulled some numbers for you. These are Stratos' top clients in the Midwest. If you can pull even a third of them, we'll be looking at a massive boost to our bottom line. I scanned the names, familiar ones, the kind of companies I'd spent years building relationships with. I felt a slow, cold satisfaction settle into my bones. These were the clients Stratos had taken for granted, the ones I'd kept loyal despite management's incompetence. I closed the folder, meeting Vanessa's eyes. Consider it done. We spent the next hour hammering out the details, marketing budgets, support teams, lead gen resources. By the time she stood to leave, my whiteboard was covered in notes, arrows, and strategic points of attack. Vanessa paused at the door, turning back with a sharp, confident smile. Hit them hard, Alex. I want to see Stratos' sales reports in the red by the end of the quarter. I returned her smile, feeling the old, familiar rush of a big play coming together. Don't worry. They'll never see it coming. After she left, I leaned back, staring at the whiteboard for a long moment. I could see it clearly now, the plan, the angles, the pressure points. I knew exactly where to hit Stratos to make them bleed. My phone buzzed on the desk, cutting through the quiet focus of my office. I glanced at the screen. Another email from Tom. Alex, let's not make this personal. I'd like to talk. My offer for coffee still stands. I let out a low chuckle, shaking my head. Tom had no idea how personal this had become. I hit reply and typed a single line. You'll hear from me soon. I hit send, then leaned back, closing my eyes for a moment as the city buzzed quietly beyond my office window. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about taking back what I'd built and making damn sure they regretted ever crossing me. The next morning, I walked into my office at 7:30 a.m., a fresh cup of black coffee in one hand, my laptop bag in the other. I closed the door behind me, tossed my bag onto the leather chair in the corner, and leaned over my desk, staring at the sprawling whiteboard I'd covered in client names, deal numbers, and potential strategies. Today was the day I'd set my plan in motion. I pulled up my Phoenix folder, the one I'd been quietly building since my first day at Nexus. It contained everything I needed to hit Stratos where it hurt: client profiles, financial reports, gaps in their service, and the long list of promises Tom had failed to deliver on over the years. I drafted the first wave of emails, each one personalized, each one designed to reopen old wounds Stratos had carelessly ignored. Hey Greg. Hope you're doing well. I was thinking about our last conversation, and I realized Stratos never fully addressed those issues you raised about response times and contract flexibility. I'd love to catch up and see if we can find a better fit for you over at Nexus. Let me know if you have time for coffee this week. Alex. I hit send, then moved on to the next client, then the next. Within an hour, I'd fired off a dozen messages, each one a quiet but precise strike at the foundation of Stratos' client base. I leaned back, taking a long sip of my coffee, my pulse steady and my mind razor-sharp. I pulled up my phone, scrolling through my contact list until I found the number I'd saved for Greg Stanton. I hit call, letting the phone ring as I stared out at the Chicago skyline, the morning sun casting sharp angles across the glass towers. Greg picked up on the second ring. Alex, good to hear from you, man. Hey, Greg, I said, my voice calm but purposeful. Just wanted to follow up on that message I sent. I've got a few ideas for how we can improve things over at Arctech. Thought it might be worth a sit-down. He paused, then let out a low chuckle. Funny you should say that. I've actually been meaning to call you. Things have been less than ideal with Stratos lately. I felt a slow, satisfied grin spread across my face. Let's get together. I think I can help with that. We set a time for Thursday afternoon, and as I hung up, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. I glanced down, my grin widening. It was a reply from one of my other contacts, a VP at Dynacor. Alex, thanks for reaching out. I'd love to hear what you have in mind. Let's set something up. I leaned back, staring at the growing list of responses piling up in my inbox. Stratos' clients were starting to wake up, and I was about to give them a reason to jump ship. As I reached for my coffee, my office phone rang, cutting through the quiet hum of my space. I glanced at the caller ID. Tom Harris. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Tom, I said, my tone perfectly controlled. I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. There was a brief pause on the other end, the kind that told me he wasn't expecting me to sound this calm. Alex, he said, his voice tight. We need to talk. I've been hearing some interesting things. I leaned back, propping my feet up on my desk as I stared at the whiteboard covered in Stratos client names. Have you now? I replied, my voice cool and even. Well, Tom, you know how to reach me. I hung up before he could respond, then stood, walking to my office window as the morning sun broke fully over the skyline. Tom had made his move. Now it was my turn. 2 weeks later, I walked into Nexus's glass-walled conference room, a fresh cup of coffee in one hand and a stack of neatly organized files in the other. The Chicago skyline stretched out behind me, the morning sun reflecting off the glass like 1,000 tiny knives. Vanessa was already there, leaning over a table covered in charts and sales projections, her sharp eyes scanning the numbers. She looked up as I entered, her lips curving into a satisfied smile. "Morning, Alex," she said, straightening as I set the files down. "I heard you've been busy." I chuckled, pulling up a chair. "You could say that." She leaned in, lowering her voice as if we weren't the only two people in the room. "Stratos just lost 3 of their biggest accounts this week. Arctech, Dynacor, and Westfield all pulled their contracts." I let out a slow breath, the tension I'd been carrying for months finally starting to unwind. "Yeah, I heard. They just signed with us yesterday." Vanessa's eyes sparkled. "And I assume you had something to do with that?" I leaned back, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across my face. I might have had a few conversations. We spent the next hour going over the numbers, mapping out our next moves, and planning the final push to capture the rest of Stratos' top clients. By the time we finished, Vanessa looked genuinely impressed. "I have to say, Alex," she said, standing to leave, "I knew you'd hit the ground running, but this is something else." I shrugged, standing as well. "I told you, Vanessa. I'm just getting started." She smiled, gave me a firm handshake, and walked out, her heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the skyline for a long moment, my mind already spinning with the next steps. Stratos was bleeding, and I had no intention of letting up. My office phone rang, cutting through the quiet. I glanced at the screen. Tom Harris. I picked up, leaning back in my chair. "Alex," he said, his voice strained, the confident tone I remembered now replaced with something closer to desperation. "We need to talk." I let the silence stretch for a long moment, letting him sweat. "I don't think we do, Tom," I replied, my voice calm, almost bored. "I'm exactly where I need to be." I heard him suck in a sharp breath, the frustration crackling through the phone line. "You're making a mistake, Alex. This industry is smaller than you think. People talk." I smiled, glancing at the whiteboard still covered in my notes, arrows pointing to Stratos' former clients, now neatly crossed off as acquired. "I'm counting on it," I said, then gently set the phone back in its cradle, cutting off whatever weak threat he'd been about to spit out. I stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling window behind my desk, the city spread out below me, 1,000 opportunities glittering in the morning sun. Stratos had pushed me out, tried to cut me down, but all they'd done was give me a reason to rise higher. I let out a slow, steady breath, the satisfaction settling deep in my bones. I hadn't just survived. I'd won.